Welcome to a crash course to rehab you from your ghosting habits. Way too many leaders all over the place have gotten used to ghosting people at some level of the scale, and I think that this harms them in a way that sometimes they don't even comprehend till it's too late. In this video, we're going to talk about why we ghost people, why we don't even recognize that we're ghosting people, how you can circumvent that, how it's stopping you, and more to ensure that you become the best leader you can be and stop ghosting people all over the place. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, coach, and consultant, and I help people just like you create teams worth leading, because life's too short to lead mediocre teams. Don't waste it. And if you're ghosting people, you're probably wasting quite a bit of it. Let's start, first of all, realizing the different gradients of ghosting, because a lot of the times we don't even recognize the fact that we're ghosting. Yes, there's blatant ghosting, and that usually doesn't happen all over the place. You're not likely to not be responding to messages from anyone all the time, never reachable. I'm guessing you'd be out of a job very quick. However, there are those people where it's easier for you to ghost because maybe they're remote, maybe they're not in your department, maybe they're in a different site, maybe they're external people who don't work in the office, maybe they're clients, whatever. Those are the people you usually don't see in the halls, and therefore it's easier for you to ghost them, and you might have a bigger tendency to do it then. Again, it doesn't have to be like that. You can have all of these different sfumature of ghosting. For example, you might have this habit of delaying responses to some people, of not checking specific Slack channels because you know that usually there are a bunch of requests there. Maybe you tell people you'll do something and you know that they're not gonna remember that they asked you to do it because you already know how they work. Maybe you know that by the time they remember it's gonna be too late and no one will really care about it, or nothing too bad is gonna happen, and you allow yourself to not do things, and maybe you just let things fall through in a way that eventually means that maybe you didn't intend at the beginning deliberately to ghost people, but at the end of the day you did end up ignoring their requests. And we do things all over the place. Yeah, even I sometimes do that. However, there's a big difference between how often you do it, how critical are the areas where you do it, who you do it with, and in general, almost every leader I work with needs to see this reduced. You see people who just go AWOL for a while regarding anything that's not critical. I have a recent article about going into wartime mode, handling crises, and what you need to do as a leader then. And what I detail there, and I'm going to put a link to the entire article in the show notes, but what I detail there is that you can't allow yourself to remain stuck in this. You can't become like an ostrich with your head in the sand for weeks on end because there's something critical. No, you have to learn how to do things effectively, fast, respond to people even when there's something major going on, because you can't allow yourself to disconnect from a major part of your role, allowing yourself to disengage from clients or from people who are in some other part of the company, etc., just because right now you're feeling like there's overwhelm. No, you need to do something. You need to find a way to not be a ghost, not be present yet not really present in the organization. That's not what leaders do. Sorry to break it to you. So yeah, there are these different gradients of ghosting, all from proper ghosting to things that are not as intense. But before we get to how we solve these and how we do less of that, I want to tell you, if you don't yet recognize, why you do it. Sometimes I see people ghosting just because they feel like they don't have the time. They feel like they don't have any other option. When I try to debug these behaviors with my coaching clients, I sometimes see that they find excuses for themselves, that they never even vocalize about why it's okay to not answer those messages and why that certain thing can wait. And I get that something maybe really isn't that critical right now. Maybe you really don't have to have that meeting that someone is texting you about. That's fine. But what we're doing is we're avoiding even acknowledging the thing, acknowledging the other person that's contacting us, And we do that because we feel like having the discussion about this not being urgent is going to be tougher than just ghosting and handling the results later. Or we feel like we can avoid doing something by not having an adult conversation about not doing it. I can just not do it and things are going to be fine. Even if you don't deliberately have the intention of doing that, of saying, yeah, I'm just not going to do whatever they're asking me to do, and I'm not going to tell them I'm not doing it. Even if you don't start with that, this is what essentially you're telling yourself, here between your two eyes, because what you're saying is, I understand that there's a request, and I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm going to move on. And when you do that, you essentially have done the calibration. You've weighed your options, and you realize that by whatever metrics you have, instinctively, even if they might be wrong, instinctively what you're deciding is, this doesn't make sense. I don't need to do it right now. I can do something else. I need to save my time, save my energy, etc. That's not, again, how leaders act, even if at first this feels easier. Let's talk about the actual costs of ghosting. You might think that in a lot of these situations, there's not really a major cost, because a lot of times, and I see it all over the place, startups are such chaos machines that when things fall through, a lot of people don't even realize that it happened, and no one goes and blames someone for letting things fall through. And depending on the actual decisions, depending on your situation, you might know that there are ways for you to do things or not do things without getting the blame. Yet, I will say that almost every time when I coach people, we have to tackle these areas where people I work with, senior leaders, complain about other senior leaders in the organization who do not have the ability to be really owners of things. Their peers have learned that they cannot trust other people, even if they didn't end up going to the CEO or talking to you straight about the fact that you let things fall through, about the fact that they cannot counter you, that you don't have accountability. Even if they didn't do that, at the end of the day, they have learned that they cannot trust you where something's too critical to fail, or they know that there are certain areas where you're bound to let things fall between the cracks. And even if they never told you that in your face, that's already the impression, the reputation that you're getting in the company. And I don't think that's a way for you to build a foundation of real leadership. Further, it's not just that people start thinking, I cannot trust that person with things. It's that when you ghost people, you start losing trust all across the organization. People start learning that they cannot trust you, that your word doesn't mean a lot, and you will see that a lot of projects get slower because people have the need of going through the motions of realizing whether something is actually happening or not, or whether you not responding means something needs to not be done or actually is still important, whether we need to re-verify something or move on, or whether someone else under you says, oh, okay, if I'm not getting replies from them, I can stop caring about it as well. And one thing that you thought, maybe I don't need to answer because they're going to be doing it anyway, now no one's doing it. I see this happening all over the place in startups, big and small. And even if you don't realize it at quick or at first, what ends up meaning is that your team does not realize what they should be doing. They work way too slowly. They start having extra second thoughts, or having to loop in more people to see whether what you're doing actually makes sense, whether not getting guidance still means that we need to still be going in that direction, whatever. I do see that. Even if it sounds odd, that's what people do. Because when you don't get a response, most people don't just live with the vacuum. If they need to get things done, they're going to have to fill it in some way. And a lot of times, most people don't have enough ownership, enough autonomy to just go forward. What they're going to be doing is ask others, find others to help them. Becoming the person that ignores others is something that you cannot allow yourself to be. You can't even think about yourself as being that person. That's bad for you. It really harms your leadership muscles. It makes you realize that your word doesn't mean a lot. And then even when you make plans between you and yourself, when you make a commitment to yourself, you're going to stop doing that. I genuinely believe that. And I think that we ought to become people who verbalize things, who talk about things, not just ignore things. One thing I sometimes do with some of the companies I work with is we get these culture agreements. We talk about how we can handle areas where things like this are going to come up for yourself and with others. Do we have a code for, sorry, I'm too busy. I'm pulling the yellow ticket to show that I'm currently too busy. I don't have time for this. Or can you take care of that? Or I trust you. I'm going to loop out of this. If you have a code for that, that makes those conversations much, much faster. And it means that you need less energy to go into it. You need less cognitive load. You can just talk about it and get out of it. Second, you can just, even without these conventions, cultural conventions in your organization, decide to approach things clearly. I'm not saying that you have to do everything people ask you to do, but I'm saying that you need to get back to them. You can tell them, this is something that we're not going to be doing for the next couple of weeks. This is something that I'm deliberately stepping out of for the next month, or I'm deliberately counting on my people to do that. Why? Because we don't have the time to do it. Why? Because I don't have the energy. Why? Because I'm asking you to be senior enough and do it for yourself. That sort of stuff. If you have meetings that you don't want to take part in, send the actual decline. No one is going to get too angry, and even if they are, they're going to get angry anyway whenever you don't actually show up, so might as well talk to them. That sort of stuff. And lastly, try to create a team that's actually autonomous, that has enough ownership all around, so that you are not in that situation too much to begin with. It's a lot easier not to ghost people a lot when you're not asked to be involved in a lot of things. So try always to think about, how can I delegate, give people more autonomy, give them more responsibility, give them more opportunities to do things by themselves, so that I grow this organization around me that has a lot of capable, experienced leaders, be it managers or just senior people that I can count on, that I know are going to take more of the load that's going to be happening. So that you create an organization with a bunch of people with broad shoulders that you and others, depending on what happens, can lean on when you don't have the capacity, when you need someone to step in. Create that and stop ghosting. Really, yeah. I understand how ghosting sometimes, for that 1 minute where you do that and you ignore a message, it feels like that's the right thing to do, or it feels like a relief. But I assure you, stopping with just ghosting people all the time, which sort of creates its own cognitive load. It creates this burden that you always feel because you're walking around feeling like you're doing something wrong. And stopping that and being a person that just says, sorry, can't get to that. Sorry, won't be in that meeting. Sorry, too busy today. Texting those 3 words, especially if you have a code in your organization, can really help make you a much more effective leader, because you won't be wasting your energy, your cognitive load, your time stressing over that, and you can just move on to being an effective leader. That's it for this video. If you like this, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you think anything that I said doesn't make sense, or if you've used any of these techniques by yourself. And if you would like to get some more free resources, in the video description, you're going to find links to my stuff, like my books, my newsletter, a bunch of free stuff, and of course, Unplug with Aviv, my new offering, which I think you're going to find highly relevant if you like this video. So, see you here in the next one.